Well, all right. Well, hey, let's put it in gear.
Let's
Welcome back to
go.
an yeah, yeah. Welcome back to another episode of Road Noise. And I'm glad you're hanging out here with the Dad and I. And as we jump into this next conversation, I just want to encourage you if you've find these conversations fun or helpful, feel free to pass them along. We'd sure appreciate it. And one of a helpful way to um, get this conversation in front of more folks is to rate it in whichever podcast app you listen to this through, or like it, or leave a review. And yeah, we'd appreciate it. So thank you. Well, all right, that's a little preamble, Dad. I'm looking forward to seeing where we're going tonight. Uh, we didn't actually look at the map ahead of time. Well, you did. I didn't. So I'm looking forward to seeing where we're going.
All right. Well, tonight I thought I'd share a story that goes back actually farther than the ministry. It goes back to the time when I was in the Air Force, and we had talked about that in some of the earlier podcasts, but I hadn't shared this story yet, and I think it needs to be shared. Um, like I said, this takes place while I was in the Air Force and while I'm stationed in Alaska, and it was while I was there that ask missionaries and so forth up there. And so I kind of felt like I was a missionary myself, even though I was in the Air Force. But one of the things I did is I got plugged into a local church there in Anchorage fairly early after I got there. And again, some of those earlier podcasts talked about that. But there was a guy that lived in the same barracks that I was in that I invited to come to church, and he accepted that invitation. And Pojo, if you're listening or watching this, I would love to hear your take on this story because this takes place um, with the two of us. So here we are, a couple of Air Force guys attending the church, and occasionally there would be someone from the church that would invite these two service guys over to their house afterwards for lunch. And that's what happened on this particular Sunday. And so we get to these people's house, and we had actually been there before. And so they were certainly no strangers, and they had become real good friends. And we always enjoyed going there for lunch. Now, let me set the stage a little bit. When you got to their house, you opened the door, you immediately had to go up some stairs. It was kind of a split level type house. And you go right, and that push to the kitchen. Now, as you walked through the kitchen, the sink was on the right hand side, and right behind the sink was a window. And that window opened up over the roof of their garage. Now, if you keep on going straight, you would go into the living room, but off to the left would be the dining room. And so on this particular Sunday, we get there, we had lunch in the dining room, and then everyone makes their way into the living room just to sit and visit. Well, where Pojo and I were sitting, we could see into the kitchen. And so while we're sitting there, lo and behold, these folks, we'll just refer to them as our host, their cat, who had been outside, decided to come in. Now, it was summertime, and so they left the window open so that the cat could come and go as it pleased. And so we're sitting there, and this cat jumps in the window right behind the sink, kind of balances there on the windowsill, and then walks towards us past the sink towards the end of the countertop. Well, on the end of that countertop sat a freshly baked pumpkin pie. And this pumpkin pie had a beautiful meringue topping on it. And you guessed it, that cat made its way to that meringue, stopped, and proceeded to lick the meringue off the top of that pie. Well, Pojo and I are sitting there and we're wondering, well, what do we do? I mean, so we said something to our host, and they looked over and saw the cat and kind of laughed. I mean, it was sort of funny, I guess. And so we continued our conversation. Well, that cat proceeded to lick every inch of that meringue off the top of that pumpkin pie, leaving that pumpkin pie just nice and smooth and not a trace of meringue on it anywhere. Well, our host had prepared this pie because there was to be a potluck dinner at the church that night, and they were planning on taking the pie. Well, we visit for the rest of the afternoon, and it's time to head back to church. And so our host goes and looks at the pie and determines that no, really shouldn't take it the way it is. So they went to the refrigerator, pulled out a can of spray whip topping. Um, I don't know what you call it. Is that Dream Whip, or I don't know. It was the spray. Yeah, what is that stuff called? All right, Kat, help me out.
It's almost like a Cool Whip of sorts, like a spray Cool Whip.
Everybody loves it. Yeah, it's still not the word I'm looking for, but and you know what I'm talking about. And so they get this can of spray out and completely covered the entire top of the this pumpkin pie. I mean, it looked great. It really did. And they're going to go ahead and take it to the church potluck. Well, Pojo and I had ridden in my car, and so we get back out in my car and we're headed back to the church, and we're talking about this situation and what is our obligation here? When we get back to the church, do we tell everybody or do we just keep our mouths shut? I mean, if we tell people, that's going to be embarrassing to our host. In fact, that could be so embarrassing that they would decide never to be seen at that church ever again. I mean, I would hate to be in their situation, if someone, told everybody what I had did to this pie. And so we agreed that probably the best thing to do would just be to keep our mouths shut. Well, we get to the church, they have the potluck dinner, and I tell you, these people knew how to cook, and the food was absolutely amazing. And these two Air Force service guys stuffed themselves, and we had a great meal that evening. But neither Pojo or I had any pumpkin pie for dessert. However, near as I can remember, everybody there that had pumpkin pie they ever had. Well, we figured with all that whipped cream on there, and that's the word I was looking for, whipped cream. With all that whipped cream on there, if there was any cat spit, they wouldn't be able to taste it anyway. And a little cat spit probably wouldn't hurt anybody. And so it turned out to be a very tasty pumpkin pie. Well, I've shared all that just so I can share one verse from the Bible. And you're probably wondering, this ought to be a long stretch. No, it's not really a long stretch. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 27 tells us that we should eat whatever is set before us without raising any questions. Oh my. I've got a whole bunch of other road noise stories that deal with eating at churches and people's homes, and maybe we'll make a whole series of these eating episodes. But for tonight, 1 Corinthians 10:27, eat whatever is put before you and don't ask any questions. You might be
Yeah.
glad.
Yeah, you might be glad. Yep. Wow. Yeah. I have heard this one before, and it's always a reminder to me um, that you just don't know what happens behind closed doors. And like you and I, we've eaten at countless church potlucks over the years, and I'd hate to imagine the kinds of things that have happened behind closed doors that, yeah, I'm just better off not knowing. Yeah. Wait, let's put it in park here, and we'll pick it up again next week.